Right now, there are two prominent autonomous zones in this country that I think are worth talking about. There's probably many other areas where people just don't get news coverage. But in Portland, we have the Red House Autonomous Zone, which has been kind of broken down after some negotiations between Antifa and the city. But for the most part, armed leftist militias have seized some territory and said, y'all get out, chased the cops out, placed booby traps. They may have removed the booby traps at this point, but I'm not entirely sure. The other autonomous zone isn't really an autonomous zone in the sense that they're calling it that, but it's a small town. I think it's called Mossy Brook, where it's essentially a COVID lockdown exempt area. Not really. I mean, as far as the state is concerned, but the mayor said, do your thing, businesses, we're not shutting down. Patriot Prayer, right-wing group, showed up and supported them, and people went about their business as though there was no lockdown. Now, in a tweet from Andy No, he says there's but another autonomous zone popping up. He says, BLM Antifa in Seattle have set up another autonomous zone at Cal Anderson Park in the Capitol Hill neighborhood. This is the same area they made CHAZ during the summer months. Video by Cho Show. Now, they're not officially calling it an autonomous zone. The city is referring to it as a homeless encampment that is to be cleared out. But interestingly, it is an autonomous zone. It's literally the autonomous zone, and it's never gone away. You know, most of us just, I guess, assume, because we don't live in Seattle, that they cleared out the CHAZ, the CHOP, the autonomous zone, and that was the end of it. But apparently, since June, people have been setting up barricades and tents and living in this park. It never stopped. When a local journalist went to cover the police or the city doing a sweep, this is what he said. Jonathan Cho, abandoning live shot. A group of people in all black emerged out of Cal Anderson Park just before my 4:30 p.m. live shot. They started throwing rocks at us. Now I know how Seattle PD feels. My crew is safe. Seattle parks will have hands full during Wednesday's sweep. Update at 6 p.m. You know, I don't know if it's fair to call it an autonomous zone because it's not really the same. You know, it is kind of different. There's tents being set up. It's more of a homeless encampment, but it is being, I guess, supported by a lot of these, you know, far left activists and extremist types. And you know what? I don't care. I just don't care about the autonomous zones anymore. All right. First, let me show you this. King 5 Seattle reports Seattle city workers to clear Cal Anderson Park on Capitol Hill. So people have been living at Cal Anderson Park for months. The city of Seattle is expected to do a sweep. The park closed in late June after it became the center of protests. Advocates for the people living in the park are protesting the city's action. A statement from community activists says forcing homeless people living in the park out will prevent them from getting medical treatment that was supposed to be available Friday. CDC guidelines for homeless encampments during the COVID pandemic urges cities to allow people to remain there if individual housing isn't an option. Clearing encampments, according to the CDC, can spread disease. The city said healthcare providers and outreach workers will provide support and services. The city alerted people Monday that the sweep would take place. The CDC is saying they should allow it to stand. So, no. I don't care they're doing this. In fact, I'm almost on board. I want to say I'm very supportive of these autonomous zones at this point, right? I don't want to be definitive because, you know, they kind of do bad things. Like at the Red House Autonomous Zone, they, I guess, tried doxing Andy No. Like, that's not cool. I got another story I want to talk to you about with arson coming from Antifa. These people are insane. But let me tell you, the city says they're going to shut all y'all down. They're going to close your businesses. They're going to tell you can't work. And then what? They're going to come and evict you. I'm not playing that game. Now, I understand the circumstances with the Red House Autonomous Zone. It's not absolutely like they were just going to evict this family. The family actually owned another property. So it's not like they were the poorest people in the world. But they couldn't afford to pay for the house. I still think the city shouldn't be evicting anybody if they're the ones who say these are the rules. Now, as for the people who live there, if you guys vote for these people, and they did, they voted for Ted Wheeler, and they keep voting for the same people. How am I supposed to complain about anything? It's what they want. Welcome to our democratic institutions. These are the representatives they elect. These are the things they do. Well, then there you go. Look, if you're in the minority in one of these places, you're going to have to move. You know, we had an interesting conversation about the Supreme Court last night. My family has benefited greatly from Supreme Court rulings that blanketed over the entire country. But I also do recognize you're not entitled to anything, right? If you live in Seattle and the people there vote for this stuff and the autonomous zones are allowed to do whatever they want and you're complaining about it, you want sympathy from me? I mean, you can leave. I'm sorry. I'll have more sympathy for the people who vote against it and fight against it. Don't get me wrong. But at a time right now, I find this really fascinating that the CDC is saying, let the camp stay. The government is going, no, we're not. I'm sorry. You can't claim to be abiding by CDC restrictions or guidance. So you got to lock everyone down. And then when the CDC says, let the camp stay, you say, nope. Because you're not really following any guidance, are you? It's BS. Their lies. Now, Andy No has an op-ed coming out of Portland. And he breaks this down. And you know what? I'm probably going to disagree with him. At this point, I think the issue isn't left-wing autonomous zones. I think it's that the right isn't doing more right-wing autonomous zones. If the left is doing it and getting away with it, and none of these people are getting arrested and they're getting cut loose, where's the conservatives to be like, okay, if this is legal and acceptable, then we will do the same. You know, I ragged on Republicans in the previous segment for rolling over belly up and just saying, please don't be mad at me, Democrats. We'll do whatever you want. That's what Republicans do. Republican politicians. They don't fight for causes. They just slow down Democrats. That's it. And then in 5 years, they'll probably just be where Democrats are today. Where's the fight for actual right-wing, conservative, or even moderate causes? Even moderates especially don't do anything. Conservatives spend too much time complaining about what the left is doing in left-wing strongholds. Why are conservatives so concerned right now about Portland? Like, oh no, Antifa. I tweeted about this. I'm like, I support it. I don't care. If these people want to go in and say, you know what, the government, we have no confidence. The police are enforcing unconstitutional edict. The moment these governors said, against the wishes of the people, in total violation of the Constitution, here come this lockdown edict. Well, then I was just like, all right, then you're illegitimate, right? Early on, when they said lockdown, we all kind of agreed, okay, it's reasonable for us to say 15 days to slow the spread, maybe 21, because we do have empathy for each other and we want to pull together. The lockdowns didn't work. The science wasn't there, and the World Health Organization said no to the lockdowns. We thought it was going to be for just a couple of weeks, and now it's turned into 10 months, 9 months. People did not expect to have their lives destroyed by unconstitutional edict. We agreed. Well, now, if we don't agree, then why should I complain? If the government of Oregon and these Democrats, if they think they're entitled to just declare things and do whatever they want, well, then why can't Antifa declare this territory theirs and just take over? I see no rule of law when governors pass these orders, not even laws, and then violate them. Gavin Newsom, California, for instance, it's like twice he went out to eat without a mask and he was like, oh no, it was an accident. Oh me, oh my. Then you look at Gretchen Whitmer and Lori Lightfoot and Nancy Pelosi. They go and get their hair done and in violation of the rules. So if they aren't abiding by them, why should I complain if in a major blue city that likes this stuff and votes for it is doing this? I don't care. You know what? I don't live there. And I left when I was in the Philly area. I left and I said, you know what? If the governors and local state government and even the federal government, if they're going to be violating their own orders, which they're not even entitled to necessarily give, if the law is breaking down, people are saying defund the police. I'm at a point where I'm like, all right, New Jersey is doing a bunch of creepy unconstitutional constitutional stuff because I was on the New Jersey side, basically Philly suburbs. Well, then I have a choice. I can stay here while these people do whatever they want. I can fight back, say like Atlas Gym, who opened their gym, or I can leave. Now, I didn't have a public-facing business like Atlas Gym that required, in-person customers. So I carried on just fine. But at a certain point, I'm like, listen, man, when you have the left saying defund the police, and I live here and I rely on them, especially with tough gun laws, I'm like, dude, I'm not okay with this. So I move out to the middle of nowhere. I bought a bunch of guns. Now I live in the middle of nowhere and I'm responsible for myself. And as far as I'm concerned, if you want to live in these cities and vote defund the police, by all means do it. Because I'm not going to live there. And this is a conversation we had the other day. I was hanging out with Cassandra Fairbanks and she was like, I don't care what California does. Fine. California wants to ban guns. Just stay away from West Virginia. And I'm like, yeah, all right, I guess that's the best I can do. Listen, when we had a cohesive community where we agreed with each other and we said, we're working together towards common goals, maybe fighting the Cold War, going to the moon, I understand why we'd be like, okay, everybody, here's the rules. We want everyone to play by these rules. Because for the most part, we agreed. Democrats and Republicans weren't too dissimilar for a certain period of time. I mean, there was a period where they were very dissimilar and shooting at each other, but that was 150 or so years ago. Now, we have, this period in the 90s and the 2000s where there was a lot of similarity between the parties, but now it's just completely separated. And the issue I see is that the Democrats in power violate the law and the Constitution and enact edict. And the police just go, okay, Constitution is just a piece of paper. You look at Michigan, where they barred the Republicans from coming in the Capitol building because these cops don't care about the Constitution. And if we are not unified by even the Constitution anymore, then why would I care what Portland does? I don't consider it part of anything I have to do with anymore. Let me say it again. There was a period, maybe in the 50s and 60s, we had a lot of turmoil, the civil rights movement, but we were also fighting a Cold War. Okay. And so it made sense. Listen, everybody sit down, shut up. We're going to work together on this one. Here are the rules. We need to win this. Okay. All right. Well, now we are still in a Cold War. We're in a Cold War with China, but we have two sides who just detest each other. And when I look at Portland and what Portland wants and what Portland votes for and what they do, I'm like, that has nothing to do with me. These people don't represent me. They don't stand up for me. They don't defend me. And these people break the laws in these states. And there's a two-tiered justice system that's been going for a long time. I don't feel represented by any of this stuff, so I just don't care. You know what I would expect to see? And maybe we need more of? Republicans setting up their own autonomous zones. If the left can do it and the cops don't arrest them, it's clearly legal and allowed. If the governors are violating their own rules, why don't Republicans just do it? I shouldn't call them Republicans because then the Republican Party is trash, but Trump supporters, conservatives, right? Now, this is what I've been predicting, that we're going to see right-wing individuals, assuming, and I think 99.99% likely, Joe Biden becomes president. And I say that because, listen, man, I know the left keeps saying, like, there's no way Trump can win. You guys just don't understand, with all of this insanity, who knows what's going to happen? We've already got CNN saying Trump's going to form a shadow government. So call it whatever you want. The point is, with all of this craziness going on, I don't see why conservatives are even pointing the finger at the autonomous zones in Portland. You don't live there. Portland is like as far left as you can get. They don't represent you. So why bother defending them? And I saw it was funny. Like a lot of people were saying to me when I tweeted this, like, I support it by all means, like do your thing, I guess. Just don't kill people. Don't hurt people. That kind of stuff. There were a lot of people who are kind of like, I don't know, like I want to disagree, but yeah, it's actually a good point. We're at a time where there is shaken confidence in the system, where in these big cities, we shouldn't have any confidence because people like Cuomo have no regard for the Constitution at all. Let me show you the story. And I'll read the end, thing, but I got to show you the story. Cuomo signs bill banning the sale of Confederate flags. That is not constitutional. I don't care for the Confederate flags at all. I don't care for hate symbols. But Andrew Cuomo banned the sale of hate symbols, such as the Confederate flag. You can't do that. We have a constitution in this country and state constitutions. That's a violation of the First Amendment. And the left cheers for it. Listen, man, if you want to live with no guaranteed rights and you think the government bestows the rights upon you, you feel free to do it somewhere else. So this is what I see when I see with Cuomo, right? And then I look at what's going on in Portland. And while I don't like the Antifa people, and I think a lot of what they're doing is an excuse, and they target innocent people, there's a lot of problems. You know what? At this point, I'm surprised Back the Blue is still happening at all. I'm surprised people are still waving Blue Lives Matter flags because I've never been a staunch Blue Lives Matter kind of guy, but I think we need police. At this point, I don't know if it matters anymore. You know why? We need police when there is a mutual understanding of the law and what we can and can't do. That way, when someone violates our rights, we need the police to deter them, to arrest them, and to deliver them to prosecution for which they can be tried and charged. But when we live in a system where there is no definitive understanding of what justice is or law, because the governors clearly break it, because the Democrats, the leftists, can go dance in the street and wave their arms in the air, but you can't go to church. There's no definitive understanding of what law is. In this case, What's the point of the police? The cops are going to go and defend the illegal paintings in the streets, and the far left are going to get away with it. But Republicans and conservatives in these cities are the ones who are not allowed to enjoy their rights as citizens. I just don't care. Andy, no rights. Last week, Portland law enforcers raided a house that had for months been illegally occupied by trespassers affiliated with Black Lives Matter and Antifa at the barricaded property. Officers made arrests and found a stockpile of firearms. I mean, that's worrisome to say the least. And I wouldn't be surprised if, this is just another escalation on track to some kind of civil war. But, upon thinking about it, I'm not entirely convinced there would be a civil war, more so a revolution, like what we saw in Syria. Disparate factions who disagree with each other, but fighting against the government. Right now, conservatives' main issue is not Antifa. You can argue, to a certain degree. But right now, the problem that conservatives and regular people are facing is unconstitutional edict from the government. Antifa doesn't like the government for a variety of reasons. I think a lot of those reasons are wrong, and I think these people are crazy. But if they want to run Portland like they want to run Portland, why do I care? I don't live there. Republicans and conservatives are seeing their businesses and lives destroyed. And once again, the problem is with the government. So in this instance, Antifa and conservatives have a mutual gain, a mutual benefit if they actually just said, you do your thing. And that's why we see, interestingly, Boogaloo Boys came out and supported Black Lives Matter on numerous occasions. And the Antifa people shook the hands of the Boogaloo Boys and said, you stood with us and we thank you. And I'm like, honestly, it's kind of cool to see people like not fight and like shake hands. But these are anti-government factions. I guess it's really funny. There's an organization that tracks hate and extremism. And one of their writers said that anti-government extremists joined in the autonomous zones. And Antifa didn't really know or care. If you're standing next to us, if you agree that this is an autonomous zone and the government has no say or whatever, fine, whatever. And so they allowed it. Some people ask, what would have happened if armed right-wing extremists did the same thing in Portland? There'd be massive outrage. What if right-wing individuals seized an autonomous zone in a right-wing area? Nobody would care. When Patriot Prayer showed up to this town of Mossy Brook, I think it's called Mossy Brook, and the town said, we're not enforcing lockdown. There were some news stories, but was there screeching and whining? No, because it's a Republican area. It's a small town, and the right was basically welcomed there, and everybody was happy. No controversy. Andy writes, under normal circumstances, the armed trespassers would be prosecuted, and that would be the end of the story. But in riot-plagued Portland, Oregon, things are far from normal. The city's progressive district attorney immediately dropped the charges against the occupiers. Their comrades soon sent in reinforcements to build a sprawling autonomous zone in the middle of a densely populated residential area. The militants called the place the Red House Autonomous Zone, named after the red painted house, yada yada. It's the CHAZ, they call it. And he goes on to write about what it is. 100 Antifa comrades mobilized. Within a few hours, the entire street was blocked off with stolen fencing, wood, junk taken from nearby homes. Some brought in power tools to reinforce the barriers, and the militants laid out piles of rocks, metal spikes, and glass bottles as strategic points to act as supply points for projectile weapons. They lined the road with impromptu booby traps, upward-facing nail strips, caltrops, and more. Caltrops. Now that one's impressive. Listen, who am I supposed to be mad at right now? The cops that are enforcing the edict of these governors, or the people who are saying no to the government? I don't know. If the cops if the DA won't prosecute these people, then they apparently are allowed to do it. I'll tell you one thing. You know who I'm mad at right now? The Republicans, because they do nothing. And the one thing Republicans are really good at is taking advantage of Trump's naivety. Now, yeah, it's true that, Mitch McConnell and everyone at Lindsey Graham. Oh, hey, Donald, how's it going? Shake his hand. Could you mind turning around for a minute? You got something on your back, and then pulling out that figurative knife, and applying it firmly to the back of the president. That's what the Republicans do. While all this is going on, you expect me to defend the Democrat governors of these places? I've been saying this for some time, man. These are blue cities. The police officers are elected and hired, not elected, but the mayor's hired. They appoint these people. They hire these people. And then you want me to complain about it? I'm not going to complain about it. I'll tell you what I'm going to complain about. Republicans not doing enough, and Trump supporters needing to do more in terms of activism. If anything, the government has said, the numerous governments, that what the autonomous zones are legal. You will not be prosecuted, in which case, Nothing wrong with autonomous zones. Well, there you go, man. Maybe it's time that people start taking responsibility for themselves more and, I don't know, taking control of their lives. If everyone in this country decided one day that, they didn't respect a particular law, for instance, and started violating it, then eventually that law goes away. When you look at like legalization of recreational marijuana, not everybody agrees, but over time, more and more people just say, I don't care, and they'll smoke marijuana anyway, and it's resulting in the law, the legality of it changing. Recreational marijuana becoming legal across the board in many places. In fact, the House just voted on it. Republicans disagreed on I think, expenditure issues and like certain weird things that were included in it. But I think there's a reason why we have nonviolent civil disobedience. If people want to engage in something to challenge the system, they should. So I'll tell you right now, Portland, I don't care what they do. And if people are upset over the government's overreach, then, I kind of get it. As long as they're not hurting people, fine, and stealing property, fine. As for conservatives, I guess the bigger issue is, when are you going to engage in nonviolent civil disobedience to assert your rights? Are you going to sit back thinking Mitch McConnell's going to swoop in and save you? No, because he just pulled the Scar, Lion King move, where Donald Trump's hanging from the cliff and he's like, brother, help me. And Scar's like, and Mitch McConnell goes, no, and then drops him. Well, Mitch McConnell's more of a turtle, I guess, and Trump's the lion, but you get the point. They just cast him down to the stampede. They don't care. It's up to you as an individual to engage in your nonviolent civil disobedience. And I think, that's the right way we go about bringing about change. I tell you this, the leftists have done it all year long, going out in the thousands, nothing. And that's it. In violation of lockdown, sure, fine. But when they all go and do it, the city can't do anything about it other than support it. That's what the Trump supporters need to be doing. Some kind of nonviolent civil disobedience, sit-ins, protests, etc. Learn from the left. You've already seen a bunch of Trump supporters like taking photos with Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. Well, maybe it's about time you learned how to organize. So I tell you, if the far left wants to set up an autonomous zone in their far left city, who cares? Whatever, I guess. There was a period where I think with Trump as president, Trump supporters were fighting for a solid, singular America. Well, now it's clear that's not going to happen, right? In which case, peaceful divorce makes more sense than violent, insurrection. So maybe there doesn't need to be even any kind of formal breakup of the U.S., as some people have even suggested. It can just be, do your thing, I'll do my thing, and if someone invades, we'll defend you, I guess. That's the way it used to be. I don't know what's going to happen with these autonomous zones, but I expect they'll grow bigger. And there'll be more of them. And I expect the right will start to engage in similar things. I'll leave it there. Next segment is coming up on my other channel. To find it, search YouTube for Tim Pool or type in youtube.com/Timcast, which is the URL to the Tim Pool channel. Don't ask me why YouTube does that. That's just the way they did it. And so be it. I'll leave it there. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you all at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. See you next time.